Welcome to the Art of Procurement podcast with your host, Philip Eidson. Here, thought leaders share the trends, strategies, and tactics that you can use to elevate the role of procurement and your career.
Hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Art of Procurement. And the interviews, they're really keeping on coming thick and fast, and we have had some great discussions of late, and I think that you're really going to enjoy today's interview. Because today, I welcome Rob Bernshteyn to the show, the President and CEO of Coupa Software. And Rob, as you will hear, has enjoyed a really successful career to date, first as a consultant with Accenture and McKinsey, before switching his attention to enterprise software. And after a period at Siebel Systems, Rob was the VP of Global Product Marketing and Management at SuccessFactors, reporting directly into the CEO. And during Rob's tenure, SuccessFactors actually grew their revenue by 15 times, which led to a successful IPO in late 2007. Rob then switched focus from HR enterprise software to the world of procurement in 2009 and has spent the last 7 years building Coupa into the procurement software powerhouse that it's become today. And in today's discussion, Rob and I focus on the concept of value as a service, so the benefits and focusing on delivering outcomes through value as a service rather than on activities. And I question Rob on, taking some of the principles of value of a service that is implemented at Coupa and how we as procurement leaders can actually apply those concepts to building more stakeholder-oriented procurement delivery models and procurement capabilities to really help our increase the role and elevate the role of procurement within our companies. Before I start, I want to thank you. It just means so much to me for you that you take the time to listen into episodes of The Art of Procurement, and I hope that it's worthy of the investment of time that you put into listening to the show. And before I roll the tape on Rob's interview, I just firstly want to go and thank this week's sponsor who really make The Art of Procurement possible. Then we'll go straight into the interview. I'm really proud to say that this episode of The Art of Procurement is brought to you by Denali. And Denali is a procurement-focused, technology-agnostic, and highly efficient managed services provider. As a former buyer and provider of procurement managed services, I've really admired Denali from afar for quite some time. Denali specializes in providing a variety of procurement services. They include category management, sourcing, contracting, supplier management, and P2P, so really anything across the procurement continuum, and they do that for global 2,000 clients across multiple industries. Denali really understands that every client has challenges within their procurement delivery model that's unique to that company. That's why Denali prides themselves on building solutions that are tailored to solve the individual needs of each client. Partnering with Denali's procurement professionals, your organization is going to be able to generate more value faster. I'd really encourage you to check out Denali for more information, tell them that the Art of Procurement sent you, and head on over to www.denaliusa.com. That's www.denaliusa.com. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Art of Procurement. And I'm delighted today to be joined by Rob Bernshteyn. And Rob is the CEO and President of Coupa. So Rob, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Phil.
Thanks. And, I was looking into your background a little bit before the interview and noticed that you really got your entrepreneurial start in high school selling baseball cards. So the first thing I have to ask is, who's your team?
Well, my team has always been the Yankees. I grew up in the New York area, and so I've always collected Yankees memorabilia, some of the greatest players in the game from the 50s and 60s.
So what would you say is your most valued piece of memorabilia then?
Oh, probably various types of Mickey Mantle baseball cards from the 50s and 60s.
And how does that go down in San Francisco, in the Bay Area, that you're a Yankees fan?
After having been out here for, I guess now 16 years, you would think I'd become a San Francisco Giants fan. I haven't, although I go to Giants games, and I remind folks that they used to be the New York Giants. So,
okay.
But typically still prefer going to Yankee Stadium when I can on the East Coast.
And so, I went through your background in the introduction, and I think it's been more than 7 years since you joined Coupa. And I imagine at the time you probably weren't short of offers, given your background. So what was it about Coupa that attracted you when you did join?
Well, it was a couple of things. I mean, one, I really saw a huge opportunity in the procurement and spend management space to build a very big and lasting long-term company, and I felt that the solutions that were available in the market were really born in the mid-'90s and never really had a chance to deliver meaningful value for customers. So that was the driver to go do that. And secondly, I really want to build something from the ground up. We had a couple of handfuls of people at Coupa. Is really an open source project focused on small businesses, and we turned it into what we think is a pretty special company that we've been growing.
Right, and you've grown significantly since then. So what's the secret sauce? So what do you think are the key pillars, if you will, that have been fundamental to that growth?
Well, I think they're grounded in our values as a company. We have three values that we ascribe to here. They're ensuring customer success, focusing on results, and striving for excellence. And we're nearly 700 people now, and I think everyone here, I'd like to think virtually everyone here will be able to instantly recite those for you if you ask them. It's about making sure we deliver value for customers. We don't waste time. We focus on results, and we try to get better and better as professionals ourselves through the learnings we undertake.
Mm-hmm. And as the technology and software continues to evolve, where do you see that technology the role that technology will continue to play in procurement as the function evolves, but also as, we hear things about AI and bots and everything that's kind of in vogue right now? Some of it's hype, some of it's not so much. I'm interested to know your perspective on where you think that goes and what it means for procurement.
Sure. Well, that's certainly a very broad question, but I'll say this. I think if you think about the world of spend management broadly, there is still so much happening that is paper-based, that's phone calls and faxes and emails, and there's a great deal of opportunity to just simply streamline existing business processes. So before we get ahead of ourselves and talk about AI and the things that could be done in the future, it's important to acknowledge that the reality is, and we at Coupa work with hundreds of global multinational companies. They are still really far away from simply streamlining business processes. Having said that, the future, I think, will bring not only the streamlining of those business processes, but intelligence that allows any company to understand how they can fine-tune their own business processes, how they can get smarter about the levels of approval that are required, the visibility to spend and savings opportunities for their organization, where risk may be in their supply chain, how to address it proactively. And they'll be able to, in the future, and we hope with the utilization of our solutions, be able to look across companies and understand real best practices based on hundreds of billions of dollars in transactional spend, how they can become really best in class in their organization. So there's a lot to come in the years coming here, and technology is going to play a huge role.
You actually made an interesting point, that there's a lot of companies who haven't necessarily even had the opportunity to take the first couple of steps on that journey. And that's something that I think we lose sight of sometimes when we talk about all the wonderful things that are coming towards us, and yet there's obviously a role to get everybody, all companies, up to a certain standard before you can take that next leap. I was interested, what are the main challenges that you hear from clients when they sign on to Coupa? What is it that they're trying to solve that makes the software that you build, that you provide, an attractive proposition for them?
Well, that often depends on where they are in their phase of technology adoption and just maturity in procurement processes. We see a lot of companies here on the West Coast that are actually relatively mature, and they're looking for fine-tuning of things. So they want to make sure that they're having compliance before an IPO. They want instant visibility to spend savings opportunities, or they may want to just use us for a way to extract more value out of their GL system or their ERP system. Yeah. And then you'll talk to companies that we have in the Midwest, or even frankly in the Southeast, where they are, as we discussed a moment ago, really trying to move away from paper and get into an environment that's going to be just simply more modern. You have organizations that are broader. I can name a few dozen out of Europe. Multinationals that are trying to get commonality of process around all the different countries that they have, and ensure that their centralized contracts are being leveraged in all these different disparate locations. So there's a whole host of reasons why they engage with us, and so we're excited to find those value drivers for them and address them.
And so if you don't have enough work on trying to do that for your clients and in leading Coupa, you wrote a book, and that's something that I'd like to talk about today, called Value as a Service, Embracing the Common Disruption. So what was your motivation to write that?
Sure. Well, the motivation was really initially born a bit out of frustration, in that I've spoken to so many executives around the world now, leading Coupa. I have the privilege to talk to folks that they're running some very sizable brand name companies, and when you ask them about their utilization of information technology inside their companies and how they feel about it, very often the answer is not, it's great, we're getting a lot of value, we know what that value is, and we want to buy more. It's typically frustration. It's I don't know, it's a necessary evil. Our IT people are inundated with all these different solutions. We spend so much money on these things. We're not exactly clear where the ROI is. The ROI might have been there when we approved the purchase, but we don't know if we ever got it delivered. Yeah. And so what we've been doing in Coupa, I think, is a bit different than that. So I wanted to share what we view really as a position paper on how we think things ought to be and how things are becoming in the world. And we want to create a bit of a dialogue around that in our industry.
Right. And so what is the notion of value as a service to you?
Well, so the idea is very simple, and I think most ideas, no matter how complex, can be boiled down to very simple things. And that is, the conversation now is all about moving to the cloud and all that comes with that. And we believe that the real answer here is not about the delivery model; it's about the value being delivered. We know that applications will be done in an as-a-service model. The real question is, which of these applications and which of these client relationships utilizing these applications are going to drive quantifiable, measurable business value for their customers, and how should customers and vendors and consultancies think about determining those value drivers, partnering around those value drivers, and delivering those value drivers. And that's what the book attempts to lay out in terms of a framework and a way of thinking about the problem.
Yeah, and so it's about delivering outcomes rather than thinking about buying a service or buying a widget. You're actually going to providing an outcome benefit that has real meaning to a company as opposed to a thing that they may be buying.
That's exactly right. I mean, if you take a parallel of music, as you said, a product, we used to buy cassettes or records, 8-tracks or CDs. Those were product purchases. But really what were we buying as consumers? We were buying an experience, entertainment, a certain mood that we were feeling when we were listening to a song at a certain point in time. Now that that's being delivered as a service via Pandora, Spotify, or others, there's completely different ways of thinking about that experience that's being provided. It's not a product anymore at all. And there's a whole host of different models that are being developed around how to monetize those services. In enterprise software, we're still shifting from product to services. It's just still, the conversation is just about delivery model. Yeah. It's not about the outcomes that folks want.
And so, with the term of value as a service, it's obviously dependent on the value, on what is value. So who really defines value?
Well, that's a great question. And I think for a very long time, it was either the vendor or the customer. Right. And, if it's a customer, they try to distill value by sending you a long RFP to try to figure out whether or not you are a vendor that can deliver value. And the vendor would put advertisements and brochures out there highlighting what they think is the value that you might want. And I think the answer is neither one. I think value is determined in partnership, in concert between a software provider or a software as a service provider and the customer. They have to get together and look at what are the options, what are the constraints within the organization, what are the strategic objectives of the CEO and the board of the company, what are the technology innovations that could be brought to bear, and they need to collectively align around what will be the measurement of taking on a certain project. Right. They need to tie all the teams against that. So the book actually spells out methods by which a software as a service or a vendor can sit down with a prospective customer and both together frame out what it is that they're going to be trying to do together. Because the reality is, Phil, people celebrate go-lives or whatever it may be, but that doesn't mean value is being delivered. Right. Something's being turned up. And that's not the answer.
One of the questions I had was, you talked about who should define value and that it's really a shared approach between, the service provider and the user of the service. Flipping that to a procurement perspective, when you're trying to work with your stakeholders internally, does that mean that procurement should be maybe playing a stronger role in helping an organization determine the value that they can get from their procurement organization, as an example? Because I think often we let the folks who measure the performance of procurement determine the value that we bring to them rather than help them understand what more we can do for them.
Well, I think in that case as well, it's a partnership. In other words, if you join as a CPO in an organization and you start talking about supplier risk, when the reality is the company is bleeding money on the profit line, and you can make a much bigger impact, but just renegotiating some contracts, you're probably not approaching it the right way. Vice versa, if you're simply going out and renegotiating a bunch of contracts because that's what you were told to do, but not identifying other value drivers around compliance or spend savings opportunities or looking for supplier risk scenarios that could really hurt the company if you didn't get on top of them, you're also not doing the company any justice. So that also is an alignment exercise where rather than going out and just selling the value of procurement, it's about aligning what value procurement can deliver in the context of the company's current and future situation. And I think that's a very important thing to understand. Too often it's one direction.
Right, and when so alignment, I always found as critical, but often it's something that's really hard to attain, or not necessarily hard. It's something that a procurement organization hasn't tried to attain. When you're working with clients, have you seen good examples of how procurement leaders are able to align with their businesses? Is it just a conversation, or is there more to it than that?
Well, I think where I've seen procurement leaders do exceptionally well in terms of driving change and driving visibility to the value of procurement is when they've aligned themselves to the strategic plans of the company. Is the company being measured, if it's, let's say, a public company, is it being measured by its revenue growth, or is it being measured by its profitability? If it's measured by profitability, where are the areas that have highest impact for tightening or operational efficiency improvement? If it's being driven by revenue, where are the areas or opportunities for identifying suppliers that can help the organization boost its R&D or whatever it may be? So I'm giving just simple examples, but it's really understanding the business and how procurement could be a player. We always talk about getting a seat at the table, but that's what's being discussed at the table, right? Business strategy. And so if you want to be a contributor to that, you have to really understand it.
Yeah, and you don't deserve a seat at the table just by showing up. You have to really show the value that you can bring.
Yeah, exactly. Or pounding your fist on the table saying, look at what I'm doing for you. Right. Well, what you're doing may not be impactful enough to matter at that table, right?
The Art of Procurement is brought to you by Denali. And Denali is well known throughout the procurement industry for the quality of the training that they provide, both as a service to clients and in how they develop their own employees. And so I wanted to hear an example of Denali's training methodology in action. So I went straight to the source.
My name is Suzanne Raggi. I'm a director at Denali, and I lead the Center of Excellence, and I'm also responsible for our Denali Academy service offering. We try innovative learning approaches. For example, we have developed our own proprietary category management game, and that is a board game in combination with cards that teams can play and come up with the best category strategy. And the game approach really helps condense something that could take several months in real life, this one walk through the entire category management process, and that condenses it into half an hour, so that the participants really have a way of applying some key concepts in that very condensed and very reduced time frame, and with a simplified version of what they do in their day-to-day job.
And so I asked Suzanne how the game actually works.
They usually do it as part of a team, so the game can be played with 1 to 5 or so participants around one game board, and the participants have to understand stakeholder requirements, and of course they change over time throughout the game, so it's not that you get them in a clear fashion from your stakeholder. Then the participants also need to understand the market dynamics for that particular category, and then they need to help the stakeholder shape the requirements. And the better they can then deliver toward those requirements, the better their final score is going to be.
I couldn't help but think of gamification in terms of the phenomenon that is Pokemon Go. The good news is that categorize doesn't sound like it's going to concern your health and safety teams.
I promised while playing our category management game, Categorize, nobody's ever fallen off the cliff.
Right. So it's not going to end in disaster.
No. Nobody's ever gotten hurt in my training.
So to find out more about how to bring innovation to your procurement training, visit www.denaliusa.com/academy. Okay, let's go straight back into the conversation with Rob. So in the book, you give 10 different principles. You talk about how you've applied the value of the value as a service kind of mindset at Coupa in delivering outcomes for your clients. And so I'd love to kind of understand a little bit more about those 10 principles. And again, kind of thinking at it from a listener perspective, a CPO or a procurement executive who's thinking about how can we deliver value to our clients rather than just focus on delivering, cost savings as an example. So if you could just take a minute and kind of go through some of those principles that you've undertaken, and then what a CPO can learn from those.
Sure. So I talk a bit about first understanding the core competencies that you have in your organization. Who's sitting around the table within the procurement group? Is it a bunch of sourcing folks or negotiators? Yeah. Right. What is the talent base that you actually have that you're working with, and then determine whether or not you could best map those competencies to the existing challenges that the company's facing or the foreseeable challenges in the future. If they don't map, perhaps changes need to be made, obviously, and then develop a value proposition that really best leverages your competency set or developing competency set against those opportunities. When you develop that value proposition, you put some quantification around that value proposition. So with these people, these are the kind of outputs we're anticipating delivering for the organization with this within this type of time frame. Get people around you aligned around that value proposition so they fully understand it, and test it with constituents all around the company. Refine it based on input you're getting from executives and other people inside the company. Further develop it. Make the customer, who is your internal customer, whether it be the marketing group, sales group, other groups, part of the solution, so they actually get aligned with wanting to deliver, help you deliver on the value proposition you're putting forth, and then track those results on an ongoing basis. And it's a very simple framework, and I give a lot of examples of how we've seen that done both by us and by our customers, but we think it works pretty well. And in fact, we've seen it work.
Could you share one or two of those examples?
Sure. So we have companies, if you actually wanted to look into Coupa customers, if you go to coupa.com/results or just go to our website and look at results, you could see customers on video talking about either the tens of millions of dollars in savings that they've been able to deliver for their company that weren't just being delivered, in an unseen way, but that executives are acknowledging and thanking them for, right. And they've actually impacted the company's profitability or stock or share price. We look at the processing speed improvements they were able to drive in their company. We look at some of the number of patients that were able to treat it in a hospital, for example, because they were able to get the goods and services needed to treat those individuals. We look at the target amount of spend companies were able to get visibility to, so they could look at for areas for improvement. So rather than call out one or two, I would invite your listeners to go to our site and actually hear it directly from many of our customers. I'd say that.
Okay, great. And I will link up to those. I'll give the link to my show notes, which will have that at the end of the show. Of those different principles, is there anything that that gives you the biggest bang for the buck, or something that you'd really advise a CPO to focus on over and above anything else? Or are they all, you have to take each one in a linear kind of framework and give as much attention to one over the other? I
would suggest that the number one suggestion I would have is make the conscious effort to very clearly delineate the value drivers that you and your organization are working for the organization to deliver. So many CPOs that I've had a chance to talk to over the years are not exactly clear on what it is that their organization is doing. They're very reactive, and they are often in a position where they're trying to find ways to drive value, but they haven't articulated them clearly. So if you walk into their company You leave their office, you go down the hall, and you walk into the COO, the COO's office, CFO, head of sales, head of marketing, and you ask them, what does the CPO do here? They're going to not have a very clear understanding of that, other than, I think they renegotiate some things, or we see them as bureaucratic or whatnot. That's not a good position to be in. So I think clarity of vision, clarity of outcomes that a CPO is driving for a company need to be well marketed, well known, first of all, and then well marketed internally.
Mm-hmm. And that's about having those conversations then, first and foremost, with the people in your internal clients, essentially, to understand what it is that they do that drives value for the business as well, and then try and tie your activities and your value prop back to them. And then they can be your advocates, I guess.
True. But I would also say, Phil, those conversations shouldn't happen blindly. In other words, when you walk into the CMO's office, it's not about, hey, how can I help you?
Right.
It's more about, hey, I understand our goal as a company is to enter these markets, or it's to drive profitability by this time, by this %. And I know you're marketing and you're playing your role in it, and I'm playing my role in it. How can we partner around the goals of the company? Having that background in that meeting is very, very important. Otherwise, you become a pure services organization, and you're being pushed around into a lot of different directions all the time.
Yeah, and then become commoditized, I guess.
True. Very high risk of
that. So my final question really is open-ended. And is there anything from the book that I really didn't touch on that you think is really fundamental to the application of the notion of value as a service, and that you think that would be a really great takeaway for the listeners?
Well, I think one big takeaway, and it's near and dear to us here at Coupa, is that very often procurement professionals and frankly anyone on the business side views software as a service companies similarly to the way that they viewed products companies, right? And really, rather than sending over 60, 70-page RFPs and getting caught up in the how of technology enablement, they really ought to focus more on the what. In other words, what is it that they're trying to achieve in their organization, and then find partners. Hopefully we could be that partner, as we have in hundreds of cases, that can help them achieve those goals, and select based on highest likelihood of it helping you achieve those goals, rather than selecting based on how many bells and whistles they might check off on an RFP. That's had a lot to do with our growth, the ability to help our buyer change their mindset from us as being an enablement vehicle, but rather being a partner in their collective, in a set of collective goals.
Okay, great. Well, I know as we record this, it's going to be published on August 25th, and the book will be published on August the 26th. So will listeners be able to find that on the Coupa website, or would there be somewhere else you would recommend them to go to pick it up?
If you go to valueasaservice.com, in fact, you could do that now. It's all the information on ordering the book, and all the background is on there. Okay,
great. Well, what I will do then is I will link up to the valueasaservice.com URL and Coupa.com at the show notes for today's episode. Those are going to be at artofprocurement.com/valueasaservice. That's all one word. That's artofprocurement.com/valueasaservice. So, Rob, I just want to thank you very much for joining me today and for your insights. I know that there's a lot there that listeners will take away. So, thanks for your time.
You bet. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you for listening to another episode of The Art of Procurement. To find an archive of all past episodes, you can go to artofprocurement.com/episodes. And to ensure you never miss another show, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe.